47 school districts are having major financial problems. That's according to a new report from the Arizona Auditor General. Why are so many districts exceeding budgets, and what can be done to address this overspending? Joining us now is Arizona Auditor General Lindsay Perry. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Thanks, Ted. Good. Appreciate being here.
You betcha. Before we get started, just out of my, what is an Auditor General?
Oh boy, the Auditor General's office is a nonpartisan, objective group of auditors. We do audits of state agencies, community colleges, universities, school districts, and we do a whole slew of audits, both on the financial spectrum and also performance audit and financial investigations.
And this report in general, in particular, I should say, the one we're talking about deals with schools, financial risks measured in public schools. How do you measure such a thing?
Great question. We look at sort of 10 measures across 7 categories. So for example, we'll look at declining school enrollment, because we know school enrollment or a student garners so much money for school districts. So declining school enrollment means less revenues into that school district. We also look at things like financial position. Is a school district spending more than it's taking in revenues? And if so, why? We also look at fund reserve balances. So if they are overspending their monies, they have to take it from somewhere. So they might have declining fund balances and those sorts of things. We also look at receivership is a big one of those. I know that's been a topic in the news of recently, but when the State Board of Education takes over a school district because of financial mismanagement or insolvency, that's another measure we look at, as well as frozen tax rates and sort of the like.
So you take all those measures, those 10 financial risks measured, and you got 47 out of a couple hundred here, high risk of exceeding budgets. A lot of these 47 public school districts are simply not doing well.
I think that's a fair assessment. What we look at is, for our financial risk assessment, we look at the sort of the riskiest of the risky, and we looked at 2 school districts. Those were the highest risk. We also, as you mentioned, look at districts that are approaching high risk. And in certain areas, like declining student enrollment, we saw 47 out of the 207 school districts with significantly declining enrollment. 48 of those districts, as you mentioned, we found issues with their financial position, meaning spending more than they were bringing in. And so yes, it's definitely something concerning that we wanted to elevate to district leadership and to policymakers' attention so that they can put a plan in place now and going forward to mitigate those risks.
Well, speaking of putting a plan in place, you offer, correct me if I'm wrong, you have a financial risk action plan template for these districts to go ahead and use, correct?
That's correct. So if you go to our website, azauditor.gov, you can look at all the reporting both at the state and district level, and also this template that we put together. It has guidance, it has action steps that a district can take depending on where they're high risk, and it's free. I also offer my people as a resource. They can always call us and walk through different scenarios, and we're there to help. We've also done a number of presentations before governing boards to explain what this analysis looks at, what high-risk measures their district might be facing, and some ways to combat that high risk.
Are districts paying attention to that, though? Because 47 out of a couple hundred, that's a pretty high percentage there.
I think that we have been waving sort of a red flag, particularly after COVID, because we knew that there was a lot of money that came in from the federal government to school districts and charter schools, $4.6 billion. Those monies end September of 2024. And so certainly what we're looking at right now is sort of that cliff. After those monies have gone away, and some districts have accumulated fund balances, and they're going to start to eat into those fund balances, what happens next? We want districts to be prepared and planned now and going forward for how to trim budgets, how to make do with less money that they might have, and that's putting aside policy decisions that policymakers make to help with solutions.
And not doing things like using capital improvement funds for basic operating costs. I mean, that sounds like it's a recipe for disaster once capital improvements are needed.
Absolutely, and that's why that's one of the 10 measures that we look at, is if you take your capital needs, say buying new school buses. Instead of doing that, you move them to operational, to pay teachers, right? To put monies into the classroom, to pay administration, food service costs. Well, you're moving those from a need to another need. And so at some point, you have to fund school buses. You have to fund the bonds and the interest on your buildings, that sort of thing.
Well, and again, the basic question here is, how do you get so far behind? And the Isaac District, the elementary school district, is kind of the poster child here for being 28 some odd million dollars behind in a district with less than 5,000 kids. How does that happen, and how can the Auditor General, how can auditors in general keep this from happening? You said red flags. Do they have to be a brighter shade of red?
Well, I think that it starts at the district level. District officials and governing board members who are in charge of overseeing the district. They need to be aware of what's going on in their district. In the Isaac case, certainly there's a lot of questions that we all are asking and that we'll get down to the bottom of. But this is a tool to let governing boards and district officials know what's going on in their district, not a year ago, but now and going forward. This is a proactive tool to look forward instead of an audit that is often looking at things in the past. And so that's what we hope to provide, is a tool, more information to district officials to make good decisions going forward.
And my last question was going to be, what is the message from this report? But it sounds like that is the message. Use this as a tool.
Absolutely. So it's for the public as well, and the governor and the legislature to use, to look at sort of a high level what's going on in the state and at their legislative district level, to be able to formulate policy. But really it's primarily geared towards governing boards and district officials and parents and community members whose money goes into their schools, to look at and have an idea of how their districts are doing.
Lindsay Perry, Arizona Auditor General. Good information. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.